Well, here we are, guys. We got the 2024 Georgia opponents list. Let's just dive right into it, not waste any time. And I like that our graphics team at On3 kind of pitted the 2023 schedule up against the 2024 schedule. So you can really get a sense of how much tougher this is going to get. If you're listening on audio on podcast, I'll just read it out to you. 2023, UT Martin, Ball State, South Carolina, UAB, all at home. At Auburn, Kentucky at home. At Vandy, Florida and Jacksonville. Missouri at home, Ole Miss at home. At Rocky Top, and at Georgia Tech. Pretty manageable. 2024, these are just the opponents. We don't know the dates yet. Clemson, we know that one. First game of the year, neutral site in Atlanta. UMass at home. These are all the home opponents, okay? Georgia Tech at home. Tennessee Tech at home. So that's your non-conference opponent schedule. Here is where it gets juicy and really freaking hard. Florida in Jacksonville. Auburn at home. Mississippi State at home. Tennessee at home. And then the road slate is just brutal, guys. Alabama in Tuscaloosa is the closest road trip. Then you also go to Kentucky. You play at Ole Miss in Oxford, and you play at the newcomers, Texas, in Austin. What a stretch, fellas.
I'm telling you right now, for us as reporters and guys that cover this team, it's fantastic to see the games that Georgia's going to have that season. Now, we got to figure out logistics. And as Jake said on our group text, what's crazy, I believe the shortest distance for a away game would be Tuscaloosa. So you look at this, Georgia's going to play 5 games on the road there with that Florida game in Jacksonville. So, man, Austin, Bama, Ole Miss. Ole Miss was the one that, I called Jake Rowe earlier, and we put together some sources and kind of figured that one out kind of late in the afternoon. And when I found out they were going to Ole Miss on top of what they had, takes it to another level. Sneaky game, Ole Miss, but obviously the headliners will be at Alabama, at Texas, and the Georgia fans on DawgsHQ on our message board. I think you guys kind of get the pulse. You see Twitter talk. Why did Georgia have to go back to Alabama after they went 2020? Even though that was a COVID season, it wasn't a full. You didn't get Bryant Denny on steroids like you will in 2024. But Georgia going back there. You think about that Vanderbilt game they lost in 2020. So kind of trying to erase the memory of that 2020 COVID season. But Georgia is going back to Alabama, and guys, it's going to be an absolute loaded. And I think Wes used the right term there. Brutal 2024 schedule.
And the one thing, man, I'll say about all of it is I was sitting there watching it, and as they flashed through every team, I caught myself saying, "Oh, that's hard. Oh, that's hard." It's the addition of two. When the addition of 2 teams to the league in Texas and Oklahoma, 2 good teams, 2 marquee teams, 2 good programs. I mean, Texas hasn't really won a whole lot significant in a long time, but you look at that game on the schedule and on paper, it looks tough almost every year. And all of those schedules look really tough. I mean, I don't know why Georgia's having to play at Alabama. I just know it's not some crazy widespread conspiracy. I mean, it's one of those things where I just either I don't care enough or I'm not smart enough, probably the latter, to figure that out, to figure out exactly why that had to happen that way. I mean, I know why Alabama couldn't play Texas because they're playing them back-to-back years already. They're not going to let them play a third year in a row to do that. So that's why Georgia's not getting that, Oklahoma game that it's missing this year. But I mean, there are some good games on there. There's some fun games on there. I think the big storyline for me is not Texas. It's not Alabama, although I'm looking forward to both of those games. Kirby gets to go get some vengeance. He gets to go get some revenge on his first loss as a head coach in Oxford, Mississippi.
Well,
he gets to
one that day.
Yeah, they took one, a big one. So
they took one.
The only team that Kirby hasn't beaten in the SEC, and that's Ole Miss. And obviously he'll have a shot at that this year in Athens. But man, I mean, like we've said and has been was said on the show, will be said a million times between now and 2024. That is a brutal schedule, and it's a brutal schedule away from home. Greg McElroy pointed out the 5 opponents that Georgia plays away from Sanford Stadium. Heck, if you want to include Clemson there too, but the 5 SEC opponents, they went 40-25 this past year. That's a really good record. That includes an 11-2 Alabama, 8-5 Texas, 8-5 Ole Miss, 7-6 Kentucky, and then a Florida team who did go under 500, but it's Florida. I mean, you expect them to be a perennial power in the SEC. Those are not cakewalks that Georgia's walking into. Any road game in the SEC is going to be tough. It's certainly tough when you've got a target on your back like Georgia will have and does have. But man, when you play opponents like that too, it just makes it that much more difficult.
And
I got a question for you. Y'all, all three of y'all maybe can answer this. Is 2024 the year the SEC goes to the ABC 8:00 primetime game?
Yes.
2024, yeah, that's when that happens. And Ro, you and I were talking earlier. I was wrong. The CFP expands in 2024 too.
Yeah.
So it all goes down in 24, baby. It's like Jack
Yeah,
Bauer.
and ultimately, that they will get the ability to have that 8:00 game. They'll do whatever they want to with it. But you can bet Georgia, Texas, Georgia, Alabama. Those are going to be 7:00 local kicks. Both of those games are going to be 8:00 Eastern ABC. No doubt about it.
And then we've
Go ahead
got
and write the story.
Jameel Ficklin over here reminding us not to mention Georgia opens with Clemson. And who's to say that in 2024, Brent Key and Georgia Tech don't have things humming a little bit better than what they do right now? I'm not ruling anything out in this schedule outside of UMass and Tennessee Tech. What's up, Mountain Jake? Welcome in to the Thunderdome, talking about this 2024 opponent list. There's a lot of debate about why Georgia gets Bama on the road, why they get Texas on the road. Look at what Bama's doing too, though. Bama goes to Oklahoma, and that really made me realize I think the SEC, it's not really me just thinking it, I think it's pretty clear. The SEC wants to put its banner programs right now, which are undeniably Georgia and Alabama, in 2024. We'll see if that's still the case. LSU may have something to say about it. Tennessee thinks it will. We'll see. They're sending their banner programs right now on the road to play the newcomers, to welcome Texas and Oklahoma to the league. And yes, it is absolutely about money, because that is must-see TV right there and all the storylines that go along with it. And obviously, Bama will have obviously come off of the home and home with the Longhorns. So I'm juiced, man. I can't wait to see it.
It's a big night. My 8-year-old is downstairs right now watching our show on her little iPad. So it's a huge night on the when my 8-year-old, hello, Miss Kennedy, downstairs. So
Kennedy, thank you for boosting our numbers.
Everybody, hey, she said, Dad, can I subscribe? I said, absolutely, you can subscribe. She hits her little iPad, and we got
already, isn't?
She's already in, man. So I'm raising her right. But honestly, this is going to dominate the talk. I'm interested. Let me ask you guys a couple questions. One little curveball here, and one or two of you answer this. If there's possibility of coming out with the best case scenario schedule, who you guys think got one?
Off the top of my head, from what I saw live, I didn't see every single team's schedules, but I think LSU has a pretty manageable conference schedule from what I saw. I don't know who their out-of-conference team will be in 2024, but
if I'm not
Brian Kelly came out looking pretty good, I think.
If I'm not mistaken, they've got USC and UCLA for that year.
Yes.
So they did. I mean, that was one that they pointed to. They avoided the word easy, used the word manageable. But I think that getting Oklahoma and getting Alabama by all means the two toughest teams that they will play, getting them at home, and then again manageable road schedule where you're going to Florida, Texas A&M,
South Carolina,
and Arkansas, I believe, are the ones. Those are 4 teams that you wouldn't, if you were tiering the SEC, you probably wouldn't put any of those 4 teams in the first tier, and a couple of them probably wouldn't even be in the second.
I don't know. It wasn't Georgia.
No,
Yeah.
it wasn't.
I mean,
Georgia.
that's Georgia's always tough, but I don't know. I mean, the thing about it is, like, in seeing those seeing the Georgia schedule and seeing the Alabama schedule and seeing the Texas schedule, the Oklahoma schedule, I was like, man, like, this is stacked for everybody now. I mean, like, this is kind of balls out stuff. Like, they're going for it here. Like, they are swinging wide, and I credit the SEC, and like you said, they're welcoming the newcomers kind of with the big dogs, and maybe a humility check perhaps when you walk through the door. But I don't know. It's a tough. I don't know. Like I said, I don't think in the way that it's structured now without the divisions that anybody just got a cakewalk anymore.
No, it's too tough of a league to think
Yeah.
that anyone just got off easy.
And it's not like you're just playing the East anymore, right? Like, I mean, the East has been down for a couple of years, and there's been like kind of one dominant team. West has had, at varying times, Alabama and LSU. Auburn's been good at points throughout that as well. Ole Miss had a few years. Miss State had that one run with Dak Prescott. And so, I mean, there's been some Arkansas is on the rise there. So that they've sort of been more competitive. But I think now that wall's down, I don't think that this is a gimme for anybody at this point.
Yeah, it's tough to really compare them if they're not just sitting there side by side. I agree with Wes. I thought LSU, had one of the more favorable looking deals there was. Texas, Rusty and I talked about that for a brief minute on the phone. Texas kind of has, it's got some of its toughest games at home, which now matters, which is, kind of now matters in that regard.